Yeah. Well,
No.
It being 7 o'clock, I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Township of McNabb Braeside for Tuesday, August the 3rd, 2021 to order. Are there any disclosure of peculiar interest in the general nature? Well, seeing none before moving on to the adoption of the agenda. Been requested that 2 items be added in under new business. 12.2, there is further information to be given to council on the speed concerns in Whitehead Road. And 12.5, Red Pine Bay usage from Kevin Wright. Was there any problems or concerns in council about adding that? Saying none, I need a mover and seconder for the amended agenda. Councilor Ryan, Deputy Mayor Armstrong, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. We have a delegation this evening from Watson and Associates, Mr. Stephen Monrod and Mr. Peter Cisco. Sorry, Peter, if I got that wrong. We have a presentation for us on transportation asset management.
Hi, good evening.
Hey,
Can everybody hear me okay?
yes.
Excellent. And am I able to share my screen, or will you have someone there driving the presentation?
you should be able to share.
You will have the presentation there?
No, you should be able to share your screen.
I don't have that ability at the moment. I was able to unmute myself, but I'm not able to share at the moment.
Can you now?
Let me check. No, I still see the same options here. I can just raise my hands or mute and unmute.
Okay, how about now?
No.
He has to be made into an analyst rather than an attendee.
Yes.
Because he's in there as attendee right now.
How about now?
All right, excellent. Can you hear me now as well?
Yep.
Excellent, perfect. Sorry about the technical challenges. Let me just share my screen and we can get started. Okay, I should be sharing my screen now. So good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. It is a pleasure to be joining you this evening. I am Peter Cisco, managing partner with Watson and Associates Economists, and also joining us this evening is my colleague Stephen Monrad, who is a senior consultant with Watson and Associates. Our firm was retained by the township to develop an asset management plan for the infrastructure that is in place to support transportation services. And while this includes primarily roads, it includes also a number of related assets such as sidewalks, streetlights, signs, all of which enable the movement of people and goods within and through the township. The asset management plan has been developed with a specific focus on a few key areas. Firstly, the asset management plan lays out a framework for defining and measuring the levels of service that are supported by the township's transportation assets. Secondly, the asset management plan provides a detailed examination of the life cycle activities required over the full life cycle of each of these assets, as well as the associated costs. And last but not least, the preparation of this asset management plan brings the township into conformity with the requirements of Ontario Regulation 58817. The regulation came into effect in 2018 under the Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity Act, and it requires municipalities to prepare asset management plans in accordance with the specific requirements that are set out by the regulation. Municipalities have been given several years to comply, as you can see on the illustration on this slide here. And the first step to compliance was the preparation of an asset management policy, which Council adopted in May of 2019. After the policy, there are 3 phases to compliance. Phase 1 requires municipalities to prepare an asset management plan for core infrastructure assets. And these plans must identify the current levels of service and that the life cycle activities and costs required to sustain those current levels of service. The first phase must be met by July 1st of next year, and the asset management plan that's being presented this evening meets those requirements, making the township compliant quite well ahead of next year's deadline. Phase 2 requires municipalities to extend this analysis to all municipal assets, and this component must be met by July 1st, 2024. And then the third and final phase will build on the first 2 phases, requiring municipalities to set specific targets for levels of service. And that final phase also requires municipalities to include a financial strategy, which will identify how the life cycle needs will be funded. And that final third phase must be met by July 1st, 2025. And then beyond the preparation of the asset management plan itself, there's a requirement for council to, on an annual basis, review progress that's being made on asset management, look at any factors that might be hindering progress, and look at a strategy for addressing those factors. And so with that little bit of introduction and regulatory context, I will hand it off to my colleague, Stephen. Stephen worked closely with township staff in the development of the asset management plan and will walk us through the remainder of the presentation. So Stephen, if you're ready, go ahead.
I'm ready, thank you. Next slide, please. So first of all, we just want to do a quick overview of the roads transportation infrastructure. So what you see in the slide and what's in the asset management plan itself is there's a map showing the road network. The key takeaway here is that the roads, the transportation network is a valuable piece of a valuable asset for the township. The replacement value is $80 million approximately. Most of that is the roadways, with a small amount of it being the related transportation related items such as the sidewalks, street lights, and fixtures. Next slide, please. So the roads have been assessed by the township in a number of ways. There was a formal assessment done of the paved roads completed in 2018, as sort of a road needs study. The data has been updated as is typically done between road assessments by using a standard degradation model to account for the typical wear and tear on the roads, and then also to account for any work that's been done and would have increased the surface to an as-new state. The condition of gravel roads was assessed by the township staff on a more subjective rating. The remaining assets will not have the signs actually have a retroreflectivity test done in 2020 that we're using as a proxy for condition. The sidewalks and street lights, while not having a formal condition assessment done with data collected, are monitored on an annual basis to ensure that they're in compliance with regulations. Next slide, please. So this here just quickly shows the results of what was actually assessed for condition. So you can see the hardtop roads. There's a lot of green, which shows that the roads are in good shape overall. The overall average condition is good, which again reflects that the network is in good shape overall. Gravel roads, there was a more subjective assessment. The way to interpret this diagram is, or this pie chart, is to think of it as saying that there are some roads that are typically being able to be maintained in good and very, in good condition, and then there are some typically less traveled roads that would be in maybe what would be described as a fair condition, because either they're more difficult to maintain or they're lower traffic roads that don't need to be maintained to the same standard. The street sign counts, over here on the right hand side, again, just the retroreflectivity test showed that 37% of the signs should be either replaced or have some attention in the near future. And so that has been noted in the asset management plan. Next slide, please. So what we wanted to do with the level of service framework is, instead of just reporting simply some statistics or like performance measures, we followed a framework that's shown here, where there's 3 levels to the framework. So the top level of the framework is the service attribute. What it does is it's usually a single word, like these examples here: accessibility, cost, efficiency, that identifies an area of a level of service in the framework. The level below that, we have level of service statements. These are plain language statements that are designed to help communicate the intent of the township in delivering the service. And then finally, there are performance measures, which are what people would normally think of as the quantitative data that that measures the levels of service. Next slide, please. So here are the community levels of service, or what we call the level of service statements. So this is the plain language communication that is going to tell the broader readers of the asset management plan what it is that the township's trying to accomplish. So one key thing to focus on here is on the quality level. There's the township road network has adequate surface quality that meets the needs of most users. So that sentence there is indicating an overall intent to deliver solid but not perfect transportation services. Next slide, please. So then underneath here, we have the quantitative measures that are going to be matched up with each of those level of service statements. I'm not going to go through these all in detail. They're in the report. I guess the one I would just like to focus on is the average pavement condition index of 67, which is in the good category. So this matches those pie charts that we saw earlier. What we would note is, if you look 2 lines down, the lane kilometers of paved roads, the PCI less than 40, there are 31.7 lane kilometers of road with this more concerning rating. This represents 12% of the total lane kilometers of the asphalt roads, sorry, the asphalt and surface treated roads. This is, while it may seem like it's a concern, we did check all of these roads are being addressed in the 10-year capital plan. Next slide, please. When we are talking about now moving on from levels of service to lifecycle management strategies, when we discuss lifecycle management strategies, we like to make a distinction between a high-level model, which is used for forecasting lifecycle costs and performance. This sketch is not specific to the township, but just illustrates that what you're trying to understand is what's happening to the asset over its whole life cycle. After that, along with that, what you want is a decision-making process for day-to-day asset management. That's the number 2. That is what ultimately results in what goes into a budget and the things that actually get done. Those will reflect more sophisticated decision-making that are reflecting the current priorities of the township and any, and more types of information than can be captured in a high-level model. Next slide, please. So right now what I'm going to do is zoom in on the high-level model. So what we have here is a generalized life cycle model for one of the road types. It is the generalized life cycle model for the HD asphalt collector roads. So these are double lift asphalt roads that have a significant amount of traffic on them. What we're showing here is just that there are a series of life cycle activities that are listed on the left-hand side. They're costed. We have an age at which the activity happens, and then we have an estimate of the average annual life cycle cost that results at the bottom. That is basically the total cost of 680,000 divided by the 100 years, so that's $6,800. Could you show the next table, please? So along with that, for each of these asset classes, we also estimated operating costs. We're not going to follow that in detail in this presentation. What it would be used for is if you're trying to do comparisons between, if you want to convert surface types, it allows you to account for the full cost of maintaining the road, which this is shown below there as the $7,450. For the remainder of this presentation, we're going to focus on the capital costs, just to drill on that. So this number 6,800, which is the average annual life cycle cost, will appear on the next slide. Next slide, please. So you can see where the laser pointer there showing that $6,800 is beside the HD asphalt collector. So similar to that, we've come up with we've done with similar analysis. We came up with the average annual life cycle cost for all of the different road types, and for the roads and related assets, the gravel, the sidewalks, streetlights, and signs, we follow a similar process, but it's simpler because really they're just placed at the end of their lifespan. So what we then have is if we have the average annual life cycle cost per unit for these different classes, we then multiply by the quantity, and then you can get an average annual life cycle cost for each of the components. And then what we do is we total all of that up to get to that $1.6 million estimate. So this is the key number. This is the number that's telling you in the long run, if you ignore a lot of the details, so this is against a generalized model, this is what you need to be setting aside or funding on average every year to be able to maintain the roads, the road network, with the strategy that was described in those life cycle management strategies. Next slide, please. So here's the punchline that shows where we're at. So I'm just going to take a minute to drill down on this diagram. What the bars are showing is the 10-year capital plan that was brought to council in September of last year. So this is essentially the output of the decision-making process that reflects the current state of the road network, the priorities, the staging of projects that needs to be done to make things work well, in terms of being efficient. So that's what the blue bars are. The orange is the orange, and there's a little sliver of green is the funding for the gravel roads and the street signs, lights, and sidewalks. So it's not a big component. Those have not been profiled in time. The idea is that you'll be spending roughly the same amount each year and addressing priority items. So what this result is, the two lines that you see, there's the solid line that the laser pointer is following, that shows the average, and if you just take this 10-year average of the spending that you've identified, that is what the result is. The dotted line, which is just above it, is the $1.61 million that we showed earlier being the average annual life cycle cost. So can you just press space? Yeah, so that what this results in is it shows that there is a small gap of 125,000. This is actually pretty good. It shows that you're 92% funded. This is what it ideally you would want to be 100% funded. And if you were to have that extra bit of funding, what you'd be doing is building up a reserve over time that could be used for potentially higher needs in the future. But what this is saying is that what you've got right now is very close to what would be a sustainable long run plan for capital. What we did, yeah, no, I think that's good to leave it there for this slide. So next slide, please. One of the requirements of OREG 588.17 is to consider what the impacts of growth are going to be on the lifecycle management strategies and your levels of service. So because you have a development charge study, development charges in place and a development charge background study that was done recently, we have a population forecast, which meets the requirements of the regulation. So it's showing that between 2018 and 2028, population is going to grow from 7,888 to 8,401, which is a modest growth rate of 0.6%. This will have some impacts on needing upgrades, and we've noticed a few different things, types of work that will need to be done to accommodate this growth. There'll be some upgrading of road surfaces, we'll be expanding road profile, and then also adding some paved shoulders. And this will be at least partially funded through the development charges studies, the development charges that are raised. We do note that, of course, that once the new assets are built, the cost of maintaining them in the future does revert back to the tax base and cannot be covered by development charges. Next slide, please. So just to summarize, what we've got done here in this short period is gone through the transportation asset management plan. We've shown an overview of the transportation assets, and we've indicated that the plan will meet the July 1st, 2022 requirements of OREA Tribe 8817. So this hopefully is, you can see it's a starting point of getting an understanding of what your assets are worth and what's going to be needed to maintain them. Over the coming years, the township will expand the plan to include all the assets so that we can meet the July 1, 2024 requirements that Peter mentioned earlier, and then ultimately coming up with targets and a financial strategy for the July 1st, 2025 deadline. Next slide, please. So our specific next steps is we're not seeking approval of the plan in this meeting. What we would like to do is to give council time to provide any comments. Presumably, they'll go to the township staff, who will then forward them to us. Once we get a finalized plan, the asset management plan will be brought back to council for approval at a later meeting. And finally, what we were suggesting is that you would start doing this annual review of asset management progress that will be required in the regulation in a few years out. The one simple way to start doing that is simply to look at get the performance measures that were reported in this presentation and in the asset management plan updated each year and reviewed in a council session, potentially linked with the budget process. So that concludes our presentation. If you have any questions or comments, I turn it back over to the mayor.
Thanks very much, Stephen. We just have to take care of our little housekeeping item so we can continue on with the discussion and we need to move or second to extend the delegation. Councilor Brown, Councilor Jacob, all in favor? Carried. Sorry about that. It's just some our delegation gave you 15 minutes and go over that. We have to do that. So, is there any questions or comments from council on this report? Staff? Deputy Mayor?
Just a comment that if, based on we'll call it the asset management plan, the 10-year plan that we have in place right now, if we're 92% on target for the $1.6 million annually, kudos to staff for putting together the 10-year plan that we have, because according to this information, we're almost there. So a combination of capital expenditures and putting money in the bank for future expenditures is what we've been doing over the last 3 or 4 years, 5, 6 years, whatever it's been. So kudos to staff for putting in place something that, according to this study, is you're bang on.
Just for clarification, David, if I'm reading that chart with the dark blue lines and the green line, and that, where it says the annual
I think I've lost sound.
No.
No, you stopped talking.
Okay.
sorry, I guess I'm trying to.
The annual life cycle funding, yeah, that's what you're looking for?
Page 13.
I had it, but there's a thing on the screen that blocks me there. The annual life cycle funding gap, 125,000. Does that mean that we're should be spending $125,000 annually on roads or putting it into roads?
What it actually says is that the long run life cycle need is going to be higher than what is currently in the 10-year capital plan. So what that could indicate, for example, would be that there's some road replacements that might be needed just outside of that forecasting period. So that difference you shouldn't necessarily be spending now, but if you don't have needs now, you would want to be building up a reserve because the expectation is that there will be needs in the medium to long term.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Well, Stephen and Peter, thanks very much for your presentation. We have a bylaw to pass on this. Accepted as a condition. Sorry?
It's next. It's next.
So, and thanks very much for your presentation, very interesting and informative. And I guess we'll move on from here. So thanks very much for your time this evening.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, everyone. Have a nice evening.
You too. Take care. Okay, and we'll go on to the next page. Yeah.
Yeah. We need to work that.
Okay. So, next part of this report, there's a recommendation. So I need a mover and second. Councilor Baker, Councilor Ring. Recommendation states that council accept this draft report from Watson Associates that the information is submitted and circulated, and further that the final report will look forward to the August 17th. 2021 regular council meeting period. Adoption. What's the question? Carried. Thank you. There's also a draft report, recommendation, secretary, please. Action. Recommend the council accept this draft report from Watson Associates as information is submitted and circulated, and further that the final report be brought forward to the August 17th council meeting for adoption. Favor? Carried. Thank you. We have a closed meeting under section 239, subsection 2, part F, for the purpose of discussing advice and subject to solicitor client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. Need a board secretary for the closed space. Councilor Green, Councilor Broom, favor? Carried. Stop recording. So thank you very much. I apologize for the lengthy amount of time we're in close this evening. However, it's a complicated yet necessary process that council had to move through this evening. So we're back into open session. As a result of the closed meeting, I want to bring forward a resolution this week. Moved by Councilor Jacobs, second by Councilor Broom. Read the resolution.
That council directs staff to redraft the site plan agreement as discussed in closed session and submit to Mr. McNabb for a signature. Upon receipt of the signed agreement and securities as outlined in the agreement, the site plan agreement and approved plans will be registered on title for this property. Further, that should staff receive all required documents and securities prior to the August 10th Planning Advisory Council meeting, the CAO will call a special council meeting.
Questions, comments? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Back to item 7, adoption of previous council minutes, 7.1, June 15th, regular council meeting. Mover second, Councilor Baker, Councilor Broom. Questions, comments? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. 7.2, June 22nd, special council meeting. Mover second, please. Deputy Mayor Aronson, Councillor Lang, questions or comments? In favor? Carried. Thank you. Reports of committee, 8.1. Public Works 2021-05 street winter sand. Mover and seconded, Councillor Brew, Councillor Lang. Mr. Brew, need to make any comments on this, or pretty straightforward?
So the recommendation reads that council of the township of McNabb Braeside award contract PW 2021-05 street winter sand to RGT Punche Construction for the supply and delivery of winter sand for the 2021-2022 season at a cost of $73,725 plus HST.
Questions or comments? Mr. Brew?
Just, it says there was 4 bids received, there was one just, no.
No, there was okay. There was only 3 bids received.
Okay.
There was a couple of bids.
Anything else? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. 8.2 in 2021 financial overview. Mover and seconded, Councillor Aronson, Councillor Jacob. Any comments, Ms. Coleman?
No, I think it's overall straightforward, just outlined. And then on track.
Recommendation is that accept the financial overview report as information. Questions, comments?
So one comment and a question. So I'm very happy to see Firebolt on here. I know that'll be a very fun, exciting experience for staff. My question is related to the note in the second paragraph on the parking beach boat launch user fees. So just a question in terms of where we expect to be at this point in the year. Is this level of revenue expected, or is it higher or lower than normal?
So we're about halfway, of their budget of $30,000. That line item, we're over $1,000.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All in favor of the recommendation? Carried. Thank you. 8.3, 2021 tax rate comparison. Councillor Scarborough.
And yeah, just as has been done in the past, council wants the rate to be frozen while the lower tier, we'd like to bring forward this report summarizing for council where the lower tier rates are. And again, this year, the township of McNabb Braeside is the 8th lowest rate in the county of the 17 lower tier municipalities.
Thank you. Comments, questions? All in favor of the recommendation? Carried. Thank you. 8.4, 2022 budget timelines. Seconded, Mayor Aronson, Councillor Jacob. Recommendation, council accept the 2022 budget timelines report as information submitted and circulated. Should be any problems, Councillor Jacob.
Just a question for you, Mr. Treasurer. When it comes to council submitting budget requests, my assumption is that would fall at the end of August in the same place the department heads submit. Is that
Yes.
correct?
That is correct.
Perfect, thank you.
That's to the treasurer review there. So for organizations such as the archives, I know that I sit on the archives as a municipal representative, and they have asked me at the last meeting when they should come with their request for funding. So I'm asking what you see as early September, late mid-September.
I would say early September because I'm going to be requesting all the budgets for departments and even the grants organizations to be submitted by mid-September, so that I can then pull everything together and have an opportunity to review the information, kind of see where we're coming in at, so that we can keep on track with an early November presentation to council.
So supplementary, they should ask to make a presentation for the first meeting in September.
I tell everybody they have to have an all list in September. Any other questions, comments? All in favor of the recommendation? Carried, thank you. 8.5, 2021 top-up funding gas tax. Moved by Councilor Jacob, seconded by Councilor Mann. Ms. Coghlan is this the amount that we're getting, is that pretty well double? Then we got over 200,000 earlier, this is a top up.
Yeah, so we received initially $227,651, and we've now received notification, we'll be receiving an additional $218,000. So for this year, I'm proposing that we could just use those additional funds to offset currently approved capital projects for the roads program, and so we don't have to take that money out of reserves. I'm very interested in hearing and learning more information is about the addition of fire stations being included to use for that funding. Because after speaking with the fire chief, several of our fire stations are in dire needs of improvements. So that's definitely something, even as early as next year, we'd be looking at using gas tax funding to help offset those capital projects. But again, until the documentation comes out and outlines like what the parameters are for that, will give us a better idea of what we might be able to use those funds for. But it's definitely exciting news.
Is there any, did they commit to doubling the gas tax for the next few years, or just year by year?
It's just a year by year thing.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? All in favor of receiving this information? Carried, thank you. 8.6, provide enforcement reports. Seconded, Councilor Ernst, Councilor Broom. Reports there for your information. Any questions or comments on? Report. Receive the report as information. Carried, thank you. OPP calls for service report 8.7, over and seconded. Councilor Lang, Councilor Jacob. People have a chance to go through it. We haven't sum up. That's 2 months. Questions or comments?
It falls back on our residents. Talking to a few members, their numbers are up in the county with OPP. So to see that our numbers are down, that's good for us. We live in a pretty good place.
Anything else? All in favor of receiving this information? Carried, thank you. And then on to information items. Correspondence. Mover, seconder for items 1 to 9, under 9.1, items 1 through 5. Have any comments on those five items?
I'd just like to say number 3, the hard work of Councilor Lang on the Claybank Gardens for a donation to the food bank. Tremendous work behind the scenes with all your volunteers and whatever. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bruin. So we were going to split the produce between the Renfrew and the Airport food banks, but the Renfrew food bank has enough vegetables that have a huge garden, so they graciously declined our offer. I said maybe next year. So our food bank will benefit from all of the vegetables that we produce.
Amazing.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Any comments? David?
Just one related to item number 1. It's definitely an exciting announcement. After many years of hard work on the part of our mental health partners, we will be getting our youth wellness out here in Bedford County. It's currently underway. We have a great team at RVH that's leading it, in addition to the Phoenix Center. You've probably all seen it on social media with the request they heard at the survey out for youth to take part in on how they would like to build the youth wellness hub. So it's definitely an exciting step forward to bring our services together, and it's great that it will be located in Renfrew and not Pembroke.
Comments on 1 through 5? Everyone there receiving this information? Gary, thank you. 10.2. Approve short-term forest management plan extension. Move seconder. Deputy Mayor Armstrong. Any questions or comments? Information provided. None. All in favor of receiving this information? Carried. Thank you. 9.3, Laura Prince, thank you, speed radar. Seconder, Mr. Brown, Mr. Ryan. First, I saw the radar. I think that's what this is, the flashing sign. Right. This has been on River Road, it's been on Lake Lake Road. So hopefully it's helping to slow people down somewhat. We'll find out on the later on this evening. There's still lots of speed going on, not only Americans, but everywhere.
I just have a comment. I just wanted to thank you for asking the county to place that flashing sign there. It was actually very helpful. I was just down the road and I saw it firsthand, how it actually helped slow traffic. And I did also want to thank the OPP. They did do, I believe, a couple of patrols at that stretch of River Road after the request was sent. So the residents were very happy to see an OPP cruiser across from their house. And indeed, the troubling speeders were stopped by the OPP for that patrol.
Receiving this information. Gary, thank you. 9.4, a letter to help stakeholder leaders regarding our community health concerns. Armstrong, Councilor Lyon. Questions or comments? No? Okay.
I will just make one comment. It's always nice to see engaged members of the community. On this particular issue, the outgoing CEO only has another month or so left in his term, and a new person will be on board by the end of September. So it's very exciting to welcome that new CEO. And I know through the Ontario Health Team process, it was a very collaborative process. The board also undertook strategic planning where I know the mayor was involved, as well as the mayor of the town of Arnprior in some of that planning. So I know that they are indeed looking at a community lens, but as the ministry requires, we need to catch an area large enough to satisfy their requirements, which is why the OHT covers the Arnprior, West Carleton, as well as out to Campbell Lake, including some of Lanark County Park as well. So it'll be an interesting conversation to have, and I look forward to seeing what comes of it.
Any other comments? First, I have had conversations with this group. Give them our comments. It's been kind of a mix up of not speaking to people, not having meetings together, but hopefully I've seen invitation to work to meet with this group from the hospital board. I'm pretty sure I saw that from the chairs and more at the top. So hopefully process of develop and move forward. Anything else? To receive this information, carried, thank you. Motions for support. There's 3 items. I know that they contacted the deputy clerk, stating that I would support each and every one. So I guess I'm moving all 3 of them. Do I have a seconder for 10.1, 10.2, or 10.3?
I'll do all 3.
3, thank you. Questions or comments on motions? Actually, I think they're all pretty important. I could probably talk for 5 or 10 minutes. I see the council has in support of all of them, so all in favor of supporting all of them. Terry, thank you. Sure. Use of township vehicle draft policy. Moved and seconded. Deputy Mayor Ashton, Councilor Baker. Questions, comments? I think this is the standard policy everywhere. All in favor? All in favor of the recommendation? Terry, thank you. 2, speed concerns on White Lake Road. Moved and seconded, Councilor Groom, Councilor Ryan. There's also further information to be brought forward on this. Let's move this.
Thank you much. Can't forget your eyes.
I feel like there was a red office.
Did we got, that for last night when we sent it? But he didn't send it to everybody,
You only
so.
sent it to 2 of us. Yeah, that's it.
Comments?
So this was a concern along with the other one listed on the agenda that I received, in addition to 4 other concerns from this stretch of White Lake over the last month. I do support what is being proposed by the residents in this case. I've requested the county of Renfrew to either lower the speed limit, increase additional signage on the roadway, or take other measures to make it safer. I will note for council's information, the information that I have from the inspector of the OPP of the Renfrew detachment. This area of White Lake Road has had 30 provincial offense notices or tickets over 2021 thus far. So in 7 months, they've had 30 out of a total of 163 in all of the township, or actually 548 in all of the township, or 30% of the tickets that have been issued in total by the Renfrew detachment. So it's very clear that they are issuing offense notices on our roads and patrolling. The one thing I will note, just because we are having a recording here, concerned citizens can report their traffic concerns to the Provincial Communication Center at 1-888-310-1122 or 911 in emergency situations. Thank you.
And there is a response from county. This first came up with questions to ask county. Mr. Perkins responded directly to Mr. Wilson. On the other side of the coin, I've 3 people under this. Angry that the speed limit down through the bridge going into the town is 60. Saying it should be 80. far as the condition of the road, it's still meets the standards for 80 kilometers an hour. Desire can forward the rest of this information up to Mr. Perkins. Is. Reconstruction of the shoulders and widening and stuff. It's the same 10-year plan. So the plan will be done when it's term.
As someone, the only member of council who lives in that area of the township, I have a, particular experience with White Lake Road, and the mountain section is quite, dangerous. And, motorists are going way beyond 80. They're going 90 or 100 down those S curves. And time and time again, I've had motorists behind me just basically a few feet from my back rear bumper, just riding my tail because they want to get to work or whatever. I mean, much as I think that we should, I would suggest that we, ask the county to put a reduced sign, speed post there, but I really think that that's not going to work. People ignore the speed signs, Calabogie Road is horrendous. And now that I'm renting a cottage on Calabogie, I'm gonna tell you, that traffic is nuts. And Burnstown Road, I mean, I was hit by somebody who passed me as I was turning left going onto McLeod Road. And she was in a hurry to get to White Lake, and she barreled right into the side of my vehicle 2 years ago. I just don't know what the answer is. Seems to be excessive speeding all over the township. So I'm frustrated, and I hear the concerns of everyone, and they have their valid concerns, but I'm not sure. I don't know what the answer is really.
The experience that happened to me on the mountain yesterday. Towards White Lake. Uphill, curve, double line. Around the curve, here's a motorcycle passing 2 cars. On the double line, I said, I would say if I had been 3-4 seconds faster when I went to that road, the person on the motorcycle wouldn't have a chance. So it's not that the cars were doing that he was passing at decent speed. The motorcycle was going well over the 100, probably 130, 140 range. This is when I come around the corner and take some cars. Let's just say 3 to 5 seconds. So changing the speed limit, is that going to fix that? I'm not so sure. They ignore speed limit signs too. No, I think we need OPP in the entire county to just blitz, not just for a day or 2, but for several months. They were always there. Something has to happen with the speed that's going on. There doesn't seem to be any consequences to speed anymore. The chances of getting caught are, what's your statistics show? For every one they catch, there'll be 500 that they don't. So, I'll leave it up to the council. What they want to do here.
I don't have any issues in passing the resolution that haven't looked into, but like you said, nothing is going to change. Roads designed and built to meet the requirements of an 80 km/h. If you drive 80 kilometers up or down that road, you will not have an issue. Councillor Jacob and I, share the same neighborhood, so to speak. I hear the cars a little bit before he does as he comes screaming through the village, depending on the direction you're driving. It's a problem all over the place. It's not the speed limit that is the issue. It's people that drive in excess of the speed limit is the issue, and lowering it to 40 or 60 or 20 is not going to change the fact that they're still going to go, some will still go down that mountain at 100 kilometers an hour. And it's not safe at 100 kilometers an hour. That's why the speed limit says 80. And in poor driving conditions, when you're coming down the mountain in the wintertime, well, common sense would indicate that you would not want to drive 80 kilometers an hour when it's freezing rain. Right? It's just common sense. So you will never legislate that out. You will never change the rules such that we will make it 100% safe. So onus on the drivers to respect the laws and common sense. They won't do it, but taking a look at it from the county will help, then why not?
I don't have a problem with that. Back to the end. Certainly got the same response, but we're on the same walk. So I'm led right into the perfect segue of where we stand with our folding radar.
Still waiting for the meeting with bylaw.
Sorry.
We're waiting for the meeting with bylaw.
Okay. Is that gonna happen soon?
I hope so. We had it on schedule and they canceled it, so we've asked them that we want to have it before the middle of August.
Okay. I think that's, I feel that that's the answer for our areas of the radar. Unannounced, so you can get all kinds of speeders even when you put a sign up saying full radar. You do?
Yeah.
Then putting a sign up, perhaps they could get, put a sign at all the entrance ways to the township. Full radar enforced speed limits. Mr. Brittany, the town?
Just, yeah, I was passed twice on that mountain 2 weekends ago. We dropped the kids off and coming back home, I was passed twice. And I had the cruise set at 82. And 4 times in the 60 from the bridge to Campbell Drive. You can put whatever speed you want, like you look at my road. The OPP have asked if we can put up our thing to track some information, because now we have side-by-side racing on this street. Like the tire marks are there. It's just with the numbers that they have, they can't patrol as much as what they used to. And the more information that the staff sergeant has requested, the better he can narrow his limited resources to do.
That's why we need our own forward.
Absolutely. I'm 100% support that.
So just to know, if I recall correctly, we got the last reports, we talked about the number of accidents on the White Lake Road. But the number of accidents from the base of the mountain to the Claybank Bridge is far more than from the mountain base to White Lake. So going up the mountain, yes, we've had some horrific accidents there. We've had far more accidents flat area going to Claybank Bridge. So we can leave it at that, and I will approach. Possibly lowering the speed limit, it seems, required that we would have to bring for a resolution. I'm not sure that's, I, various point, but I'm not sure that's the answer. Anyway, I'll take it to, the county and have further discussions. All in favor of receiving this information? Carried. 1.3, National Day, Proof of Reconciliation. Over and second of this, Mr. Byrne, Deputy Mayor Anderson. Creating a national holiday for National Day for Truth and Reconciliation for September 30th of every year, starting with this year. Questions, comments? All in favor of the recommendation? Carried. Thank you. 12.4, Valerie Tenno, request to reduce rental rate. Seconder. Councilor Jacob. Questions or comments? So my question is, are those times available on those days?
Yes,
So, for 20 hours over 10 weeks, 2 hours a week for 10 weeks, the reduced rate, from $40 to $30. I personally don't have a problem with that. It's something to get residents of the township out of. Staff direction to advise Ms. Pennell that the rate will be $30.
So just to play devil's advocate, if we do it for one person, the question will be that one person. So we have to be ready to have that conversation at some point. And I'm not advocating that we reduce it to 30. I'm just saying we do it for one.
You gotta consider everyone else. I would be looking at every request individually as to what the event is going to be.
My one thought is it might be beneficial perhaps for staff to take a look at, as we're getting into the COVID recovery period, perhaps the reduced rate makes sense to get people using our facilities. And then we return to a regular rate when we're potentially into 2022, for instance. It might be something to look at from a staff perspective.
As I said, I think we need to look at each one individually, because if somebody wants to rent it to have a stag or something, or a party, to me, doesn't need to be reduced. Something that somebody that's getting their residents active and out of socializing, that works for me. First half, we'll look at rates for the rest of the year. So, back to staff direction to send this panel or advertising that these dates this time only. The rate will be reduced to $30. Agreeable? Bylaws.
No.
There's a conflict by holiday usage.
This will be using Friday, but, so. Yeah. When they actually bought theirs, yes.
I didn't hear any problems of them being there.
There was a lot of speculation about what they're doing.
Oh, just imagine. Just imagine. The numbers would be fine. So, any comments or questions, in opposition to this request? Second by Councilor Broom. And we advise Mr. Ryder that he has approved to use red line pay in those states.
Yep.
Thank you.
Only if he brings a green bowling suit.
The bylaws, 14.1, bylaw 2021, statutory paid holiday policy. Seconder, Councilor Jacob, Councilor Broom. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor of the bylaw? Carried, thank you. 14.2, bylaw 2021-46, fire protection agreement. Under Collins. By Councilor Broom, second by Councilor Nye. Questions or comments? Under Collins, if it would sleep here. That's what I have to help the neighbors. All in favor of the bylaw? Terry, thank you. 14.3, bylaw 2021-47, remuneration bylaw township staff. Let's see here. System we talked for, moved by Deputy Mayor Harrison, second by Councilor Nye. Questions or comments? Not sure if this is the one that we're going back through it again. We have a new hire. Do we, we did 3 weeks holidays after the year? Or is it
Yeah, great.
3? Is that in line with
Everybody else.
9/13? Okay. Any questions or comments? All in favor of the bylaw? Carried, thank you. 14.4, bylaw 2021-48, site plan agreement with authorization of 21 Ayahuasca Shores, Minkus, moved by Councilor Nye, second by Councilor Broom. Questions? Comments? Seeing none, all in favor of the bylaw? Carried, thank you. I guess members of the public can. See that?
Yeah,
Oh,
there's none on
there's none. Okay. See the dates of our next meetings. Board second for the confirmatory bylaw. Councilor Broom, Councilor Nye, all in favor? Carried, thank you very much.
So who do I